Okay, let's take a look at this Module 9 concept, variable practice. Um, we should do variable practice because we never do something the same way twice. That's the prompt for the question. So let's just have a look here. If we can do the same thing twice. Ow! Okay, so just a little joke there. Can we do the same thing twice? That's a little foreshadowing of my conclusion. But what does the research say about this variability of learning? And should we learn when we have a lot of things that are high interference or low interference, meaning lots of different ways and different aspects of seeing the task? Or should we really just focus on doing the same thing over and over in a more kind of blocked sort of concept as we've learned about? So the research shows, and Shea and Morgan is kind of the groundbreaking one. And for me, this really was eye-opening because you go through sports, you practice, you do whatever. You don't think a whole lot about how effective your practice is. Sometimes you're bored, sometimes you're not. But they basically looked at this block learning, low interference versus variable learning. But what was the most interesting wasn't really the learning in the moment, but it was the retention of the learning later. And they found that in a variable learning situation, you definitely saw better retention of the skills in the short and long term. They looked at sort of 10 minutes versus 10 days. And then also they found that in high complexity tasks, you really saw this, which also seems to make sense. When we think of open tasks, you're out on a field or having to make a ton of decisions, do a lot of different things. A lot of different things are happening. You would think that variability when you practice is more simulates what you'd see in a game. So that kind of intuitively makes sense as well. And then sort of backed up there by the research. But then the question really is, do we ever really move the same way? And I think in open skills, I think it's pretty easy to say, we're moving all over the place. I mean, we're always at different angles, different, orientations, whether it's, so I think nobody would argue too much that during the course of a game, of any particular sport that's very open, that you'd never do anything much the same. I mean, you're in a different location most of the time. But then when people bring it up is when you get into a more closed skill. So free throws, for example, in a basketball game. How about that? Or darts, as my graphic here shows. Or say bowling, or shooting sports. The biathletes that are cross-country skiing and that. But I mean, my argument really would be that the human organism is so complex, and so much it's always in a state of flux. I mean, we're constantly breathing, for one thing. When you think about just our chest cavity expanding and contracting based on our diaphragm and our breathing, that our body is always in motion. So repeating the exact same thing the exact way every time, it's just not going to happen. I mean, a free throw is a great example. Even the best free throw, even Stephen Curry, renowned shooter, he's about 90%. He can't get 100% free throw shooting. Little things change. Maybe he's real tired. Maybe any number of variables are going to go in there to make it really impossible to do the same movement exactly the same. All systems firing, body systems, all down to the cellular level. I mean, we're made of trillions of cells. How are they all going to be in sync? It's kind of not going to happen. So even in those skills, you'll see variation. And you could argue that even if you make the task real easy, say you get 100 stones and you're sitting 5 feet from the ocean, you got to throw them all in the ocean. You're going to get them all in the ocean. You could manipulate the constraints, but even then, the human organism is such that, I'm an older guy. If I, maybe I have a heart attack at number 50, I don't get to 100 because there's variability. There's risk in that. So there's nothing that ever can be duplicated exactly. I mean, even machines, you see entropy, you see wear and tear on a machine that eventually breaks down down and starts to have error. You know, there's nothing perfect. So that's more of a philosophical question and a kind of global question. So in the end, my conclusion, no, we don't ever repeat the exact same movement. But to get to the training, yes, variable training is going to help us, going to help with retention, going to help in those open skills. But I would argue even for the close skills where it's kind of hard. I mean, darts, what do you do to practice that and add some variability into it? I'd say even with darts, do stuff, extra noise, I don't know, movements to the side, some strange thing that might happen to throw you off as a dart player. More sort of concentration skills might be something you could work on in your practice. It reminds me of the free throw shooting where they have the stuff behind in the background to try to distract them. Practice in conditions that are very strange that you probably are never going to encounter in a real, say, darts match. But on the odd chance that they did, maybe your practice can help you mitigate those risks to your performance. So I think, yeah, there's really no argument against variable practice. It's kind of best practices, and it's supported by research. And the idea that we could ever do something the same twice really isn't practice makes perfect is really a myth, is really not the reality of how we work. Practice makes better. Practice might ingrain things into your memory better and give you some permanence, but certainly not perfection. Okay, thanks.